So welcome to a question and answer session with one of our fabulous sponsors and really incredible thought leaders in the cannabis industry, Amy George from Earthly Labs, to talk about her carbon capture technology and some of the very cool projects that she's been engaged in the last year plus with the cannabis industry. Welcome, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm going to pull up just a little graphic and just please tell us about Earthly Labs and yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah. So our vision at Earthly Labs is to capture CO2 from what we would call small scale emission sources, unlike sort of a big refinery or oil and gas complex, and purify that CO2 and allow our customers currently to use it, or in this example we're about to talk about, to sell it. We're super excited to pilot the first ever capture solution between a brewery in Denver, Colorado, with a cannabis dispensary just down the road. The two partners we had on this pilot were Denver Beer Co. On the craft brewing side, a leader in the region and the country, and the clinic, who has leading retail outlets throughout the Denver area and sells a portfolio of products. And we demonstrated in this pilot the ability to capture excess CO2 from what would be a normal fermentation byproduct, purify it, and then deliver it to the cannabis grower to enhance the growing cycle. You'll see here in the middle of the slide, that is the Earthly Labs technology. We call it CC, which is short for carbon capture. So that's kind of her brand name. And on the left-hand side, you can see our customers and also the CDPHE, which is the Center for Public Health and the Environment there in Colorado. Caitlin Urso was a catalyst for this pilot and actually approached Earthly Labs. But our technology is really market leading, the only one sort of in the world, and this pilot is also very unique as the first in the world example of a way to capture CO2 and sequester it using cannabis plants.
So cool, Amy. I'm curious, can you just tell us, how did you get started doing this? Like what prompted this? What's your background prior to doing Earthly Labs, and how did you start this?
Yeah, so my background is varied. I have an MBA with a focus in environmental management and entrepreneurship. So my vision was to find market-driven solutions to solve environmental problems. With my career, I've done that through a variety of experiences. Early days, I worked in the process industries with leading consumer products manufacturers like Nestle, cement like Cemex, and then chemical companies like Adafina, Chevron Phillips. And I helped them through software, artificial intelligence, identify emissions and enhance their productivity, and saw that they had hardware that could scrub emissions and meet environmental goals and regulatory requirements. And so fast forward, having founded a consumer product company, I saw the world shift to this conscious consumerism and wanted to address climate change by allowing small businesses to scrub CO2 from whatever their emission source was. So that was really the catalyst for Earthly Labs, was to address the growing amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, but do so in a way that provided value to those that invested in the technology. So again, we have visions of a lot of other sources we'd love to tackle, but our first one started in craft brewing and then has expanded into cannabis.
How interesting. And I mean, you touched on this a little bit, but has your vision, has it grown at all since you started this progress and process, or is it still really where it was when you started?
So in some ways, it is exactly the vision we had We imagine there are certain applications where somebody can collect CO2 or they emit it, but they can't use it. So a brewer is a perfect customer because they both emit it or create it and can use it. But a variety of other possible partners could be building operators. They're using energy and they emit CO2, but they don't use it. So what's great about the cannabis example is it demonstrates what we have a vision for, which is a CO2 exchange, which provides an opportunity or an outlet for that CO2 molecule that is a value added feedstock to the next partner. And it's beneficial to both sides of the economic equation. So there have been a lot of discussions around CO2 trading environments that are really sort of paper trading or financial trading. But what's super cool about this is we were able to demonstrate a physical trade of a physical molecule and create value on both sides of the equation for small businesses.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, and you hit one, I mean, building operators, how many industries do you think you can address with this? Like how much carbon can be captured that's being emitted out there and then reused? How big can this be?
Yeah, so the forecast around what is called the carbon circular economy or CO2 circular economy is it's a, someday an $800 trillion market opportunity by those that are looking at CO2, because we will have to find other outlets for this molecule in order to continue, enjoying the quality of life we have today. So the climate scientists have modeled that we need to find a way to avoid 40 billion metric tons. That's kind of the global challenge. Earthly Labs has signed up to 1 billion metric tons. So we know we have to address a variety of industry needs in order to meet that goal. But we also love the pioneering and innovative spirit of our partners. About half of all emissions that are CO2 based are small scale. And so that's really where we play and have tremendous amount of expertise. And most of the other approaches, whether it's policy or technology, have been on really big problems that cost, hundreds of millions of dollars to both solve and create solutions for. And so we've decided to break the problem into smaller bite-size chunks and also invite other people to the table to invest alongside of us and demonstrate that we need both solutions. We need big solutions and we need small business solutions.
Interesting. I just want to quickly welcome those of you watching on Facebook and Instagram. We are watching those channels, so if you want to throw out some questions as we go, please feel free to do so, and we'll do our best to relay them to Amy. Once again, we're here with Amy George from Earthly Labs, doing a brief Q&A talking about the carbon capture technology that she's developed and leveraging now into the brewing and cannabis industries. I know that you touched on this a little bit, talking about the project that you developed, Amy, with CDPHE and Denver Beer Co. in the clinic. But one of the questions I have from our notes that I want to do is, what have you done so far in cannabis? Can you kind of spell it out for us explicitly and touch on brewing as well?
Yeah, so we are excited. Our first customer was the clinic, and we spent a good bit of time talking to a half a dozen potential partners at the end of last year to join us. We weren't sure how this project would go, which is why we just describe it as a pilot. Our belief was that the plants would respond well to the CO2, but we didn't have any data that validated that. So we really celebrate the clinic for jumping out there as a leader, and Denver Beer Co. similarly. So both parties made an investment in technology. So that pilot was our first customer. Our goal was to demonstrate that the brewery could meet the supply needs of the cannabis grower, that it was relatively easy for both parties to maintain and use the recovered CO2, and then the quality of the plants were maintained. So we have a great GoPro video that we took throughout the 16-week harvest. And then the exciting end result is that the clinic was able to increase their yields over 2%, as well as their potency and terpenes. So we're thrilled that the client not only had positive results after their market leadership, but they also were able to yield even better and more product with this recovery CO2. We're continuing to monitor those KPIs. The belief from the clinic is that they will only get better as the plant gets more used to that feedstock. So we're excited to share, but the most exciting thing is the response by the customers. So when we launched this product line, which had its own brand called 93 Hoppy Trees, because that was the equivalent of the number of trees worth of CO2 that we captured at Denver Beer Co. The marketplace really responded to that. So the very first release, they sold out in one location, and we're fast selling in the other locations. So we continue to monitor their sales data and sort of what their customers are excited about. But what's great in terms of a return on investment is to see that these market leaders are rewarded by the consumer, particularly in a competitive market, whether it's cannabis or brewing. To have that differentiator is really awesome. And again, they're doing the right thing for the planet. So for us, we're thrilled that the market's rewarding them.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, there's so much evidence and data out there showing that consumers want to buy sustainable products, ethically created products, organic, et cetera. And in cannabis in particular, there are huge challenges around labeling and product quality, quality assurance, quality control. It's something that the Cannabis Certification Council deals with quite a bit. So I was personally very excited to learn about those market implications, because there's the kind of standard ROI that you might derive on technology and saving on CO2. But Amy, I was really excited when you said, the biggest driver here could be the market outcome and the demand for these products. So that is just so exciting. Can you talk about, you said the strain was 93 Hoppy Trees. And again, for those of you in Colorado, that's at the clinic, if you can go find it. Can you talk about the Denver Beer Co. side and some of their benefit from going through this process, beyond just, of course, the environmental outcomes, but are they seeing any market benefit? What other savings or benefits are they seeing?
Yeah, great question. So both parties have been profiled in both local and national media, including the Washington Post. We have some additional national media hitting this week, and then all of the industry trade pubs. So they've both benefited from additional awareness as a market leader. And on the Denver Beer Co. side, they are both capturing CO2 and selling that CO2 that would naturally just vent into the atmosphere. So they are getting, compensated for that capture piece, which helps them to recover their investment on the equipment. You asked about what else are we doing in cannabis. We continue to talk to market leaders in the cannabis industry and are excited to advance additional partnerships like this. We're also talking to folks on the extraction side, which is a net new application for us. So we are thrilled to continue the CO2 ecosystem that we have proven works at Denver Beer Co. Thrilled at the clinic's expansion, and similar to the clinic and the consumers, Denver Beer Co.'s customers, have responded favorably to their showcase. They issued a special release beer to coincide with the 93 Hoppy Trees. So they have celebrated this partnership back into their consumer base as well.
Very cool. This is a good bridge. How do people sign up for this CO2 exchange? What's the process?
So our process with any potential partner is to just understand how you run your business. understand on the cannabis side how much CO2 you naturally would purchase in any given year or on a certain harvest in a certain room, and look at, depending on the scale, whether it's small, medium, or large, how would we stair step into the solution? Obviously, a smaller grower, it's easier for us to find a brewery partner. So we do what we call a CO2 assessment, phase one, understand volume and price. And then stage two is what size brewery would we have to partner you with in order to execute this, and who's close by to where you are. We have a database of breweries, and in Colorado, we have the benefit of the state's help, and they're happy to pull on additional partners nationwide if it's not in Colorado, which is super helpful because most states have CO2 emission reduction initiatives, and so they work collaboratively together. So that's kind of the phase two, and phase three is really execution of the solution. So our normal kind of production timeline for our equipment is anywhere between 14 and 16 weeks. If somebody said yes today, or we completed this assessment, which may take a couple days, we could be up and running by end of year. The key question is whether the grower wants to invest in the equipment or whether the brewery wants to invest. In the case of our pilot, both parties invested in their specific equipment. But we do have some growers now that are looking at purchasing it on behalf of the brewery and just taking the excess. So there are a couple different models depending on the grower's perspective and their enthusiasm to execute.
How interesting. And the best way is just to reach out to you directly, I presume?
Yeah, there's two great ways. You can email me at amy@earthlylabs.com, and I or one of my team members will get back in touch with you. And we also have a form on our website at earthlylabs.com that has a CO2 exchange link. So you can see there, and that puts you right in the queue for us to do what I described, which is help you understand if there's a fit here for your grow facility.
Very cool. Thank you, Amy. I'm just curious, I mean, as you've gone through this and you've had some learning now with Denver Beer Co. and the clinic, what have the big challenges been beyond just the normal business stuff of getting to scale and all that? But what have the roadblocks been of these projects?
Well, the exciting thing is, I would say for a first time initiative that has never been done before, it went really smoothly. I think all parties were thrilled with the results and we all worked collaboratively together. So I was thrilled to see the clinic expand their partnership with Denver Beer Co. as a great sign of that success. The hardest part, to be frank, is this upfront discovery and finding the brewery partner, depending on the volume you need. So that for us has been, because it's, there are two groups that have to make a decision. That's probably the hardest phase, but once we get through that, the rest is super easy to implement.
How interesting. Any unexpected opportunities, benefits, outcomes that were positive, that were surprising?
Well, we, of course, our whole goal was to just have healthy plants. We did not have grand ambitions that we would improve the yield or the potency or the quality of the plants. So that is probably the biggest benefit, which again, we have, most of the scientists on the call may question, one data set. So we're excited to continue to monitor that. Obviously the base health of the plants is great, but when you step back and think about it, this is a natural byproduct. And so you don't have the hydrocarbons you would have in commercial CO2 or methane derived sources. So you extract those impurities, and the allowable limits could be as big as 50 parts per million. And so you take those out and you aren't sort of surprised that the plant may respond more favorably to this organic input. So we're excited to continue to monitor that. The second thing we're excited to do is to study the climate impact, obviously to leverage the plants as a key part of the climate solution. I think to the extent we continue to be open to find new avenues to address the challenge, that could be great for the industry. To the extent there continue to be innovative states that are looking at ways to provide incentives to cannabis, that would be another way to do what they do in solar, whereas anybody who invests in solar gets a rebate or tax credit. The same should be true for anybody who invests in carbon capture and sequestration. So that's sort of a whole new world order that, you know, you have to demonstrate it works first. And then once you have proof it does, you can start those policy conversations. But again, I celebrate what you guys do at the Cannabis Certification Council to advance these kind of thought leading conversations around sustainability and policy. To the extent it benefits the business model, great, and that your consumers reward you, that's sort of the double bonus.
Right. You know, as you know, we do the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium as a live annual event in a more common year. This year it's been all web-based, more stuff like in this format. And, you know, it's all about just trying to bring those thought leaders together and drive the conversation. And I actually missed it, which is we try and make all of the content connect to the economics of this, because for so many business owners in the cannabis industry, it's rough and tumble out there. They're paying a really high tax bill. It's a cutthroat industry, and as much as they want to do what's good, they have to also do what's economically viable. And this may be a good place to kind of close on. I know in some of our offline discussion, we talked about the CO2 market and the huge variance in cost and price there. What are the kind of basics on the economics of this? If you're a cannabis business or a brewer watching this recording or watching live on social media, what considerations should they be taking in mind?
Yeah, so a couple of things are happening now. There is a global forecast of CO2 shortage because a lot of the supply chain is linked to oil and gas. And so we've seen a surge in interest and curiosity around capturing CO2 from nondescript sources just to survive, just to meet sort of your basic needs. Some of our customers have had their supply cut in half. Others have had price go up 30%. Even before that happened, the economics for a solution like ours, you know, on the grower side, it varies. The real expenses in sort of piping and tanks, and then any necessary permitting required to have potentially additional tanks, it may already be covered in your permit. That's kind of the scope of the investment, which could be, you know, under 20,000 or, you know, south of 100,000. That's kind of a range.
Yeah.
The brewery equipment is between 75 and sort of 95K, again, depending on the size of the brewery. And that's in our current equipment. So there is a footprint that we can serve with our equipment today. And then we are expanding our own footprint to build larger systems. So again, for a really big grow facility, it may be that we pilot one part of the grow operation. The economics for the clinic, they were able to save 15% on their CO2 bill. The economics for Denver Beer Co., because they're making a more sizable investment, is under a 2-year payback before they sold the CO2. And once they sold the CO2, it's closer to a year. So they're able to pay that back more quickly. And again, we have talked to growers that pay a lot of money per pound. And so their cost might be not 10x the clinic's, but three times what the clinic pays. So, and we've seen others that are under that. So it really varies. It's true in brewing as well. The cost of CO2 varies by how far that truck has to go. So folks that are in rural environments or far away from CO2 sources are paying more. And those that have grown organically and started with a few CO2 cylinders and have kind of maintained those probably have a higher cost than someone who started big out of the gate. So, and that's true in brewing and it's true in grow operations. Again, the big thing is that in most of our customers haven't really considered CO2 as a place of inquiry. So it's just a guaranteed ingredient that shows up every week or every other week. And the same is true for the growers. So I think it's a whole new world to say I have access to a natural product. That's really cool. And, you know, how are my plants going to respond? And then how's my customer going to respond to this new strain?
It's incredible. And the data that you're getting from the clinic showing the greater yield, the terpenes, I mean, all of that. And then the even bigger bottom line there, the consumer demand and response to the new product is really, it's enheartening, really. It's great to see and hear. I think we will wrap there. Again, we are joined today by Amy George from Earthly Labs. Check them out, earthlylabs.com. They will be back with us, hopefully Amy and maybe some of her colleagues in October for the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium then. Between now and then, we'll also have at least one other event and potentially some Happy Plants episodes. So thank you all so much for joining us on social media and here on Zoom. We will be posting this on YouTube, so please check it out and send Amy a note. Get in touch with her. She is a smart lady doing cool stuff. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you, Ben, for having us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.